Recording in progress.
Good evening, everyone. At the conclusion of this week's parsha, Pinchas, the Torah describes for us the request of the daughters of Zelophehad that they inherit their father and that they have a share in the land of Israel. And the response Moshe receives is Cain b'no Zelophehad Dovros. Whatever they said was correct, and they are entitled to shares. And then the Torah details for us the laws of inheritance as they exist in halacha in Jewish life. So that really is what I want to talk about tomorrow in the Shiur and the Parsha in greater detail. But here I'd like to point out one or two nuances which are very important. One point the Ramban mentions. The rule is, as the Torah described it, that if a man has sons and daughters, then the sons inherit before the daughters. But we'll discuss this tomorrow in the Parsha, because that has been changed by Jewish custom over the centuries. The question is, how could you change it? But anyway, the sons inherit over the daughters. If a man does not have sons and he only has daughters, then the daughters inherit. If a man does not have sons or daughters, so then the halacha is, as mentioned in the Gemara Yevamos and in Bava Basra, that we go in a vertical line. And since there is nobody to go, so to speak, at the bottom of the vertical line, because there are no sons or daughters, so we go up the vertical line. And the parents inherit. If they're not there anymore, so then the halacha provides that the brothers of the deceased inherit. And then we go, so to speak, in a horizontal line of inheritance. The Ramban raises the issue that that's what the Gemara says is not what the Torah says. The Gemara says that you go back to the parents. But in the Parsha of Nachalos that we read, that's not mentioned at all. It jumps immediately to the brothers, to the horizontal line. So then why did the Torah omit the halacha of the vertical line when obviously that is what it's supposed to be? That question is posed by the Ramban. Raman gives a unique answer, which casts light upon halacha generally. There's a concept in Jewish life and Torah called Drachei Darchei Noah. The ways of the Torah are ways of pleasantness. That's the basis for the Yisur of Lashon Hara. It's the basis for the Yisur of Gezel and Onoah, of violence to someone else. If you look at it, it's a value that permeates almost every aspect of halacha. It has to be Drachei Darchei Noam. If it's not Drachei Darchei Noam, that can't be what the Torah meant. And the poskim throughout the generations have applied that to various instances where famous instance where Reb Chaim of Volozhin, Reb Chaim Rabinowitz, was matir in Aguna on very, very flimsy grounds. The testimony of a non-Jew overheard hearsay evidence from an inebriated non-Jew. And he was challenged on it by one of the other rabbis of the time. One of the rules in Jewish life is that there always is another rabbi. So Reb Chaim wrote him back. And he said, basically he said, I don't have any proofs from the writings of the halachic authorities to back me up completely. But he said, Dibarti in Komi. I had a conversation with my maker. And since the concept is Drachei Darchei Noam, so therefore I said that it's permissible for her to remarry. Because the Rebbeinu Shalom wants Drachei Darchei Noam. He doesn't want people to suffer because of halacha. So the Ramban says this concept here too. Ramban says the Torah does not want to mention a case where, God forbid, parents have to inherit from children. That's not Drachei Darchei Noam. So even though it happens in the world, and there are unfortunately many, many such instances, the Torah doesn't want to discuss it because it violates its principle of Drachei Darchei Noam. It's not pleasant to talk about it. In Yiddish, they used to say about some things, es ist nicht schön. It's not nice. I can't tell you that it's wrong. I can't show you in the Shulchan Aruch that you're not supposed to do it, but it's nicht schön. It's not nice. And that's also a concept. Because a Torah Jew is supposed to be Drachei Darchei Noam. So the Ramban says, in order to emphasize that point, the Torah purposely omitted this case because it's not a case of Darchei Noam. And because of that, therefore, we would be made aware that that's Drachei Darchei Noam is the governing principle in halacha and how we study matters. And the Ramban further explains, we find that the Rebbeinu Shalom, so to speak, told Avram Avinu about the incident that Sarah Yemenu laughed when the angel told her that she was going to have a baby. So it says, Lama zeh tzochako Sarah leimor, ha'afum no meled v'ani zokanti. It wasn't right of Sarah to laugh, to mock. Now, if you look in the Chumash, Sarah said more than that. She didn't only say, Ani zokanti, I'm old. She said, Vadoni zokein, and he's old. But Rebbeinu Shalom Kavichol didn't tell that to Avraham Avinu. Told him half a conversation. Ramban explains because it would not be Jocher Darchei Noah. But be unnecessary to cause pain. So it's a governing concept in halacha. It's a governing concept in Jewish life. Unfortunately, in our time, it's almost non-existent. Because we live in a very aggressive age. You can't say, the entire newspaper and media would have to go out of business if it would be Jocher Darchei Noah. Though there was a time, in my memory yet, when not everything was reported, because it wasn't nice. In the United States, when Franklin Roosevelt was president, and he was paralyzed from the waist down, the newspapers never published a photograph of him as a cripple, and they never mentioned it. Can you imagine such a thing today? So there was a concept of Darchei Noah. Darchei Noah is civility one to another. So the Ramban says in this parsha of the inheritance, the Torah came to reinforce this concept, to make it clear that it's Jocher Darchei Noah. And it does so by omitting the case which would cause discomfort and would cause people to feel that somehow this was troubling. So that's a great concept that governs us. We take this pasuk from Mishlei, Jocher Darchei Noah v'chol tzivosei shalom. So we say it when we put the Sefer Torah away. We even put it to music, to melody. But we don't think of it in the import that Chazal thought of it. Chazal saw it as a governing rule in life and in behavior and even in halacha. And therefore, Chaim Volozhiner could say, I matir and aguna because Jocher Darchei Noah. And there are many, many other cases in the Tshuvas that echo that opinion, that viewpoint.
There is no brothers. Brothers include sisters?
Yep, afterwards. The Gemara says that there's no Jew that doesn't have relatives. Eventually, you'll find somebody that's related. When you find somebody that's related, that becomes the Yoresh. Because we are all from Yaakov Avinu, and if we'll all go back to Yaakov Avinu, we'll find somebody that we're related to, whether we want to be related to that person or not. Rabbi Hanania ben Akashi אומר, רוצה הקדוש ברוך הוא וזעקת את ישראל, לפיכך חיבר להם תורה ומצוות, שנאמר לנו חפץ זמן צדקו, יגדיר תורה ויאדיר.